Of course, there's an error. Okay, that's fine.
Embiid stepping back and stroking two. Bogdanovich thinking about a three. There it is. Yes!
See it again. No double team help, and Embiid takes it right to the rack.
Embiid, step back, jumper, you bet! There he is again. The Euro step there. Embiid getting Gobert to fight.
Those certainly were the good old days. What's going on, everybody? This is the Feed to Embiid on a Saturday evening, about 4:30, December 4th. I do have my comrade Bryan Toporek with me tonight. Bryan, how has your sanity been in the wake of this team, in the wake of your own life? Is the hair coming out yet?
The hair's been coming out for a while, but that's because I'm getting old and washed. But I will say having an infant is less stressful than watching the Philadelphia 76ers on a nightly basis.
That's right. That's right. Maybe you can just put the infant in front of the TV and he'll fall asleep on his own because it's so boring.
I know. I feel bad. Like, this is his first exposure to Sixers basketball. Like, I missed the boat last year. That was my one window.
That's right. That's right. So the team is there's something. I'll tell you that much. They are something. At 12-11 right now. Honestly, it feels much worse than 12-11. I don't feel like. I feel like the state of affairs from the fan base side of things is certainly not 12-11.
No, I know. It was like all good vibes when they were 8-2. And then COVID wipes out half the team, and it has just been downhill ever since. But maybe this Hawks win, maybe this propels them back up because now they get Charlotte Monday, Wednesday. Like, half of Charlotte is out with COVID, so
that's right.
Unless James Bouknight drops 40 on them, and then we hit a new low. But
it'll happen. It'll happen too.
Very strong chance, yeah.
Yes. Of course, now we're at the point where it's devolved into a dark depression to the point where now it's like, oh, okay, this guy is out for the Sixers, so they'll win now.
Yeah, right, yeah.
It's like actual players on the Sixers need to not play in order for them to have a chance to win, right. Which is just it's a sad state of affairs, obviously. Tobias Harris, it's not been a great go lately for him. He's played 14 of the 23 games this season. 6 of the misses were due to COVID, and then misses the game last night with a non-COVID illness. I suspect the flu because it's been going around, and somebody from the Hawks was out with the flu as well, I think, or a non-COVID illness. So I just gotta kind of correlate that in my head to maybe some seasonal stuff. But he misses the Sacramento game and the Golden State game with the hip, and he also missed some time with. He didn't miss any time, but there was some questionable injury reporting with the knee that he bumped at some point. So I think there might be a case where there is, within him, there's a little bit of pain somewhere, there's some things holding him back. His vertical athleticism has never been great, but it feels like he's had a lot of trouble overcoming bodies at the rim this season. Here are some numbers for you from November 10th to December 2nd. 18.8 points per game. 48% on twos, which is the 34th percentile for his position. 46.6% effective field goal percentage with a 3-point frequency, 22%. So not taking a lot of threes. His effective field goal is down. His twos are down. Everything is down. Really. What do you make of all that?
Yeah, I mean, I, knock on wood, have been lucky enough to avoid COVID so far, but based on what Doc had said about Tobias and about Joel as well, both of them not only had it, but had symptomatic cases of it. And we saw last year, a number of guys, Seth Curry on the Sixers, and then like Tatum had to use an inhaler after he had a case of it. So we don't know the extent. Like I haven't heard that Embiid or Tobias are using an inhaler now, but we don't know how that affected them. Like Embiid has said it affected his cardio, if nothing else. So maybe that's the case for Tobias as well. He's trying to get just back to normal. So it's hard for me to like just jump to, oh no, this guy just totally sucks now. Like we don't know how it affected him. It affects everyone very differently. So I think we need to give him, some grace there. But in terms of just, it feels like he's back to the player he was in 2019, 2020 before Doc came. And then Doc comes and is like, stop dribbling, just make quick decisions. I don't want to see you, dribble out of wide open threes into mid-range jumpers with a hand in your face. Like that is the exact opposite of how you should play basketball. And now we're seeing that version of Tobias come back, being less decisive, just ball stopping, basically. Like when Doc continues to talk about the ball sticking and the offense not going anywhere, it's like more often than not, it's probably either Joel or Tobias that he's talking about.
Yeah. And you can like, I don't think it's a skill thing that's the problem, but rather like a stylistic thing that's the problem. And I feel like that's not something that's just going to be, this isn't something that is just going to go away. Like if he feels healthy or if his body recovers from COVID, like he's just not thinking the game through very well right now. He's dribbling too much. And I feel like they should put like one of those dog collars that where like we have the electric fence, overstep it zaps you, but put that on his ankle. So every time he goes in 3 dribbles, zap. Pass the ball. That's it.
Or just goes inside the 3-point arc. Like we don't want to just stay outside for 3 games. That's your only shot you're allowed to take.
That's right. Everything inside the arc is hot lava.
Right.
I'll do that. But you make a great point though with it is a fascinating how just because Joel admits the fact that he's had trouble with COVID, and he's been pretty public about that struggle, people are a lot more willing to forgive his recent struggles. Whereas with Tobias, there's no room for understanding. It's that he sucks. I told you he sucks. He's always sucked. And we should relitigate everything that's ever happened to the Sixers because of Tobias Harris.
Well, and I think too, like Joel, we saw last year, runner up as MVP, just has a much higher ceiling than Tobias and is earning less than Tobias. Like Tobias, when he signed that contract, it's the same thing that happened to Andre Iguodala years ago in Philly. Like as soon as you sign that type of major contract, the expectations go up as well. And like Tobias Harris is a very good player. I don't think he was ever going to live up to that type of deal. So that always comes as part of, if he's earning half as much money, I think we have half as many complaints about Tobias Harris as we do right now.
Well, yes. And I feel like that's 100% correct. But to be fair to Tobias, it wasn't like he had this Brandon Ingram burst onto the scene-esque year and where he's an all-star and he's with this and that, and then he goes into free agency and then completely regresses. He was he had the best season of his career, but there was a sort of a linear progression there. He thought, I remember hearing this somewhere, but he thought he was getting like 4,120 on his next deal, and they come in with 5,180. I feel like anybody in that position would, like any random Joe who is worth, who at most thinks I'll get like a veteran's minimum deal to come play basketball and sit at the end of the bench. If a GM said I will give you 5 years, $190 million, anyone's gonna be like, I know I'm not worth this, but
right. I'm not. To be clear, I'm not blaming him at all.
Yeah.
And I'm not blaming the Sixers either, honestly, because like the Knicks were out there, they had a ton of money. That was the year, I believe, that KD and Kyrie spurned them. So there were going to be other suitors. I mean, this is where you get into the relitigation of like, well, they knew this offer was coming. They knew they were going to have to pay up like this. Do you trade for him in the first place, knowing it?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess my point is that it's less about Tobias not living up to anything and more about he was never going to live up to this.
Right.
But that's not his fault. So why is he the doormat? But a couple more numbers that I think are just very telling of the way it's been for Tobias this year. -4 on the season with him on the court are the Sixers. They are +27 with him off the court.
Good. Great.
Those are great. Yes, great values. Now, some of that is going to be that they played the Kings without him, and that Kings team was a shit show.
Yeah.
And other part of it is that a lot of the games that they lost without Joel on the road, they got blitzed. They got blitzed by the Warriors. Right. He didn't play the Warriors game, but they got blitzed by Utah. There was the Knicks game where he played pretty well in New York, and they just got blitzed anyway. So there are going to be games where that isn't a true reflection of him. But over the last 9 games where he's really struggled, -10 with him on the court, -25 with him off the court. So I think that kind of tells about the Embiid absence. But last season with Ben there, even when Ben wasn't producing the way that he can, it was still Ben's catching the ball and he's bursting towards the middle of the lane. And then even if he's not doing anything himself, he's still pulling over to sort of stop the drive. And then he's kicking to Tobias, who is then either shooting or slashing. So I think there's a Ben Simmons domino effect here where there's a catalyst missing that causes this all to happen. And I think that's just part of the Ben Simmons effect that people don't want to talk about is Tobias is now in a position where he has to make more plays. He has to make more decisions rather than just catch and go, because there is not a big 6'10" guy with the dynamic facilitation ability there to draw to and then kick. And I think that's just part of it. Now, before Tobias missed 6 games with COVID, they were +13 with him on the court, and they were +37 with him off the court. Now,
it's like the first part sounded good, but
now the first part is a sample size of 198 minutes. Second part is 90 minutes. So there's got to be the end of that New Orleans game where the bench came alive and was expanded the lead to 20. There's some things there. There's games where they just had garbage time in the fourth quarter and they were able to really add on to the leads and whatnot. But the fact of the matter is that he just simply has not been very good. And they were much better with him off the court last night, and at least in the first quarter. By the way, last season, they were +324 on the season with him on, +78 with him off. But in the 337 minutes last year where Joel and Ben were off the court and Tobias was on the court, they were plus 7.42 points per 100 possessions. So Tobias it wasn't that we overrated Tobias. I don't think it's that. I think it's that he had a very good year last year with some factors that the fans might not want to admit, and that Ben Simmons aided him being better. He was probably more confident than he is right now. He didn't have COVID. He didn't have injuries. I think the jury is still very much out. There's 60 games or so left in the season for him to, recover this. But right now you're seeing a lot of the things that triggered Sixers fans 2 seasons ago.
Right.
And it was just dreadful and awful and don't want to relive that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think part of it too is, the whole team is still getting used to Tyrese Maxey running the point rather than Ben. There is a stylistic difference in that Ben was always a pass first guy. Tyrese is much more of a scoring threat in half court settings. So we've seen, since Joel has come back, Tyrese's scoring has gone down because he is now trying to figure out, okay, and Doc has said this, I gotta get the ball to Joe, gotta get the ball to Tobias, gotta get the ball to Seth. But these guys too have to figure out, okay, how are we going to have Tyrese set us up instead of Ben Simmons, who we've been playing with for the last couple seasons? The continuity that this team otherwise could have really relied on, that could have been one of their strengths and helped them rack up early season wins. Because of Ben Simmons' absence, they don't have that, and they're learning to play with a new head of the snake.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point, the stylistic differences, because if you're a guy in Tobias' shoes and you're with Ben Simmons, you're thinking, this guy is going to pass at any point. I got to be ready to go. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Tyrese Maxey, it's, oh shit, wait, he passed me. Okay, now, right. Now I got to do something here. So I think it is it's a reset of your wiring in your brain. But having said that, there's just no excuse for him catching the ball, against the Magic and off of a pin down and then faking and then 2 steps in for a pull up 15-footer. And you can even see Doc's body language. He puts his hands up in the air.
I did like that.
Yeah. And then against the Celtics the other night, it was the first play of the game where he dribbled in and thought about it and then stepped back for a 3 and missed it. So you're just you got to get that wiring down. Now, there's again, we'll see where it goes, but it obviously has been a tough go of it lately. What I can't stand seeing anymore are the tagging Daryl in tweets, tagging Doc, tagging anybody, Sixers in tweets, and saying trade Tobias, gotta get rid of Tobias. I got news for everybody. No one wants that contract. Not right now. They don't. Maybe a year from now, maybe a year and a half from now, when there's less time left, that maybe becomes a more palatable deal for a team that has, wants to take on a draft pick for an expiring guy. Maybe that happens then, but right now that trade's not going to happen. So right now it's how do you get the best out of him? How you where is Ben Simmons going to fall in the mix here? That's what the situation is, and there's no point in talking about anything else because I don't think anybody's taking on that contract.
Right. Yeah. I mean, also the question is, what are you trading Tobias for? Like, if I've seen a lot of like, oh, trade Tobias for CJ McCollum since the bend the seat for CJ deal isn't going to happen. It's like, all right, cool, makes sense. But then you're having Tyrese Maxey, CJ McCollum, and Seth Curry in the same. Like, that's your 1, 2, 3. And then Danny Green's going to be your 4. Like.
That's right. We're just gonna make Danny Green the designated defensive guy for everybody. He might not stop me. He will be the first line there.
Right. And that, like, okay, cool. Then you trade Ben Simmons for a 4. Oh, who? Like, I like the idea in theory, but I feel like if it's a Tobias and CJ trade in particular, it'd have to be like CJ and Covington for Tobias and Seth. And the Sixers should not want to give up Seth. Just baseline, but especially, that, like, that's where I think that deal goes to hell. So I agree with you. I'd be surprised if they are. I think they're willing to move Tobias. He's not the caliber of player. I mean, if they're willing to move Ben Simmons, they're very clearly willing to move a player worse than Ben Simmons.
They tried to move Tobias in the Harden deal last year. They were like, we'll try Tobias and Shake and picks and see where it is. Someone was like, yeah, no, I'm good with that.
Shocking.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think he's getting moved this year.
Yeah.
At least.
And I also think that people underestimate the importance, especially for a guy like Embiid, where there's been so much revolving door with personnel around him. The more guys that you trade, the worse. It's not going to get better. Like the talent might improve, but the talent still has to fit together. And if Joel is like, oh, this guy's gone now. Oh, wait, no, my shooter Seth Curry's gone now. Oh, well, this new guy will come in. Oh, well, he doesn't really get me yet. It's not. It's not. You're probably going to be in a position where you're not as great, not as better off as you think you are, if not worse. Is where I stand there. Now, a lot of talk has been made about the play at the end of the Boston game. The glorious. I can see you taking a deep breath and shaking your head, which is how all the Sixers fans felt.
Just that whole game, like, I wish the Men in Black like memory eraser thing was real, so I could just memory hole that from my existence.
That's right. So I gotta tell you, I thought it was a great play. Thought it was a good play by Doc, and because when you look at the matchups there, like they have Jaylen Brown, they have Marcus Smart, they have Al Horford, they have Jason Tatum. Those are all guys that can switch. And so when you have switchiness like that, where you can't just bully one guy, your play has to be really simple, or else you're going to end up accidentally switching the wrong guy onto yourself and getting screwed. So, I like the idea of taking Maxey out because he's not a shooter, he's also not a good passer. And plus, when they have that much size, you don't want to put that much size on a passer. You don't, because then it's going to be problematic. So Niang is the inbounder. It's a bad pass to Tobias first off because he has to jump and he has to, he basically has to forfeit his positioning on the floor in order to get the ball. And Horford has a chance to then sneak up under him and put pressure on him. He's catching the ball away from the basket anyway. I thought the spacing was fine. You have Seth in the corner, you have Danny at the right wing, and then George's fades to the opposite corner. And they ultimately got Joel with a mismatch on Jaylen Brown, which is really all you can ask for. Like only thing you can ask for in this situation is just to have a smaller defender on your most dominant player. That's all you need. Did Tobias lose his head? Yes, he lost his head. He also had Al Horford there, like trying to push him back to the line as he's catching the ball. So not a great play by Tobias. It was a terrible game by Tobias. Also wasn't a good inbound pass by Niang. I think that's something that you just live with when calmer heads prevail.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think it's more of execution was flawed rather than the play itself was flawed. Because as you said, if it's a better pass to Tobias and Tobias can just hit Embiid, more often than not, Embiid's either going to score or draw a foul. Honestly, you're probably just hoping for a foul in that situation because there wasn't really time for him to, there's only a couple seconds left. He's not going to be able to back down Jalen with his usual like series of moves.
Right.
So yeah, I think it was just, and we've seen Doc too. Like he, out of timeout plays have not been a weak suit for Doc. Like he has his strengths and weaknesses as a coach. Rotations you could poke a lot of holes in. The plays he draws up tend to be pretty good. So I think that was more just, the execution not being on point. And, again, this is another place. Sixers fans are going to hate to hear this, but if you have a Ben Simmons there to make that pass instead of Niang, maybe it's a little bit more on the money, or you can draw up something slightly different to get Tobias, further away from the sideline.
Yeah. I think like there is a case to be made that maybe like Danny Green, because he has no problem throwing an inbound pass to a post player.
Yeah.
Maybe he should be the one you're setting down screen for, except if Tobias is in the corner, they were helping off Tobias to double Joel earlier in the quarter.
Right.
So they were so that was going to just add an extra body that was going to help off of Tobias. So I think overall the schematic setup of the play, the manipulation of the play was fine. Execution just sucked. But when it's an ATO, fans judge it by, okay, who took the shot, and did it go in or not? And if it's a binary of, oh, this guy took the shot and he missed, the ATO sucked. Well, no, that wasn't the case. It was a fine ATO. They just blew it up.
Right.
Now, I do think, though, there is something about their late game execution when they don't call a timeout. Like Minnesota game, they're up 3 with like a minute to go. Minnesota scores, and then they come down. They don't use a timeout, and they're just nonchalant. It's like 20 seconds left in the clock, and I'm sitting behind I'm in the media section, and I'm sitting behind. I'm looking at the shot clock. I'm like, well, wait a minute. They're going to have a lot of time left if you guys don't go. And then Maxi's just they're just standing around. Joel's just standing around. They're not ready to make a play. And turn them over. Timberwolves convert the bucket, and that's the game. Last night against the Hawks, they don't take a timeout. The final play of the game is 5 seconds left. Danny's at the half court line trying to throw an pass to Embiid with the shot clock winding down. So they're not getting good live action plays out of that final execution, and that's something that as a coach you should have seared into your players' brains. With 5 seconds left on the clock. There's no timeouts. You either go full court. What's the player running? That I feel like has failed them recently. And I know Doc in the beginning of training camp said, we had a lot of carryover from last year, so we're comfortable with where we were on that front. Now we're focusing on end of game execution. Well, got news for you, buddy. It's not going great on that front.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, like I agree, it shows up most pointedly at the end of games, but I feel like the execution just hasn't been great offensively for most of the season. Yeah. And like I don't have the cleaning the glass numbers in front of me in terms of like what their half court rank is, but like with all of the absences because of COVID and just random injuries, like I almost just want to throw out any season long numbers for the Sixers anyway, because it's like there's so much noise in there right now. But this is where I'm just relying on the eye test. And it's like, I think last year, because Embiid was so individually dominant, both just in general, but especially with this face-up game, like he had never hit shots at that clip before. He helped cover up a lot of their overall team flaws. Yeah, like, it was just like individual brilliance, and we're seeing that to some extent with Seth Curry this year. Like there are a lot of plays where the offense just does nothing for 20 seconds. Seth Curry gets the ball with 2 seconds left on the shot clock, hits a difficult shot. So it's like, going back to your binary example, like what was the outcome of this possession? The Sixers scored. Great. But the execution sucked, and you can't rely on that moving forward. Yeah. So I think they've had somewhat of these issues really throughout Doc's entire tenure. It's just like Joel Embiid was playing at an MVP level last year. He is not, he's an all-star. Like, I think it's fair to say he, when healthy, he's playing at an all-star level, but not, I haven't heard his name in the MVP conversation this year, and I don't think it should be yet. Tobias has taken a step back from where he was. Maxey, when all these guys were out, was putting up huge numbers, but now that they've returned, he's taken a step back. So, like, Seth Curry has been the one constant throughout this year. Like, you can count on Seth Curry.
We all drew up, because we all thought would happen.
Yeah, right, exactly. But the rest of it, it's like I just don't know what to expect out of any of these guys on any given night. And when Joel is struggling to the extent that he has, I know he bounced back against Atlanta, but against Orlando and Boston, I forget, it was like 7 of 33 or whatever. Like, the team is built around Joel Embiid, and if he's struggling to that extent, they're probably going to struggle as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, and those were the same miscues and the same shortcomings they had prior to Doc. Just the roster construction, they haven't had shot creators. They had one, and they chose to re-sign Ben over him, and they let him go, and they brought in Al Horford instead.
And Josh Richardson.
That's
Don't
right.
forget Josh Richardson.
That's right. That was a great time. We're all involved. But yeah, I mean, I think number one, they haven't had an X's and O's tactician to really organize an offense. Like, there have been so many games this year where it's gotten too close, or they've lost when they could have won, because there was no fourth quarter offense, really. It was the stock letting them say, okay, we're going to identify the guy that we're going to go to, and that'll be it. And this isn't high school. You can't just like have the coach at the sideline screaming different, like banana 42, like different plays. That isn't how that works in the NBA, because at the end of the day, everyone is smart enough and advanced enough to know and identify, like, okay, this is what this means. This is what that means. This is how we're going to counter it. So at the end of the day, you have to put the ball in your best player's hands and just go sometimes. But they could use more organization. And I know Doc can do it, because like last night, you saw they were down 5, and then he draws an ATO for Seth, and he gets a Curry, he gets a Trae Young switched onto him, and they draw up a beautiful, curl around the screen of a pin down and nail a 3 for Seth. More plays like that are how you can make Seth's life a little bit easier without having to have him dribble through fire and traffic every time. So I just think more of that would be helpful too. But going on to Joel's touch, it's been frightful, to say the least. 45.4% effective field goal, which is the 8th percentile for centers. That's great. 41.3% on twos. That's a 6th percentile for players of his position. 26. We've all seen the stat by now, but 26% of his field goals are coming at the rim, which is awful. 57% are on the mid range, and he's shooting 35% on mid range. So nothing is going well for him at the moment. I don't know, and he said the ball is something. And I think that's real, because I think more guys have mentioned that. And I think the fact that Game is starting to catch up a little bit. Paul George is starting to catch up a little bit. They've had more time to play. Joel has not. He's had 6 games or whatever, 7, 8 games, and then COVID for 9, and then back now. He's trying to get his legs back under him. But that touch has really evaded him to the point where, like, across the board, this is the worst he's been at the rim since his rookie year. This is the worst mid-range shooting of his career. And of course, it's the best 3-point shooting of his career.
Naturally.
Which makes sense. Yes, of course. I don't really know what to make of that, other than I think he's probably already missed enough time and played it poorly enough at points to the MVP conversation is probably a lost cause at this point.
Oh yeah, it's gone. Yeah, that's completely gone.
Yeah.
I always thought that was going to be a reach anyway, unless they traded Ben quickly, because I just didn't think the record was going to be good enough for him to be in that mix. But yeah, he's not catching. I mean, I think it's Steph, KD, Giannis, 1, 2, 3 in some order. And like Jokic is playing at a similar level to what he did last year, but the Nuggets without Murray, now without MPJ, I think he and Embiid are going to be in a similar boat where it's like these teams just aren't going to be good enough for them to get legit MVP conversation.
When he's not just trucking Markieff Morris in the back.
Right.
He's playing great.
But, I mean, to be fair, I think we all supported that. So, but no, I mean, the point about Embiid, again, it's like with Tobias, like I want to give him some leeway here between COVID, which he again has said like really did a number on him, and then also the knee. He injures it in the first game of the season, and I don't know if it was just like a bruise or if it was at all related to the meniscus injury from last year, if he's feeling any effects from the meniscus injury, because he did not get that surgically repaired. So we don't, if we had to put a percentile on like how healthy is Joel Embiid right now, or how like compared to peak physical condition, where is Joel Embiid? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm guessing we're in like the 70% range rather than like 85, 90, 95. So I think that's probably part of it. And like, I hate to keep beating this drum, but it's another place where you see the absence of Ben Simmons. That for as much consternation as there has been about can these guys work together, how do they fit together, they at least had chemistry, especially in the regular season when teams aren't as locked in defensively. Like I forget what the exact number is, but I know that Sixers like toward the bottom of the league in terms of transition points this year. They're just not getting a ton of easy opportunities. And I think a large part of that is the absence of Ben Simmons. So, this is again, like, I don't know that we're ever going to see Ben Simmons in a Sixers uniform again. So you can bemoan it all you want, but they're going to have to figure this out either way. Hopefully things get better whenever they do trade Ben and stop wasting a roster spot and $30 million of cap space on someone who's not playing right now. Like at some point, there's hopefully an infusion of talent or reinforcements coming that will make them better. But like personally for this first quarter of the season, I've cared less about win-loss record and overall stats and standings and all that stuff. It's like you just almost have to go back to the process years where you're just like tracking individual improvement, or in the case of Tobias, regression. Joel too, honestly. You're just trying to see like what have these guys either added to their bag in the last year or over the off season, or like where are some of the problem spots that if they do make the playoffs and if they do especially go on a deeper run, what could be their Achilles heel come game 5 of a second round series.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point, for sure. And you the point about Ben, I think, is spot on. Like Ben knew how to get Embiid the ball. He, and Embiid, because of that, knew how to establish himself in the post. I feel like this season he hasn't really made an effort to like establish himself in the post. And I wrote this last night, but there's a difference between walking your man down to the paint and just like saying like, hey, I'm here, ready to go.
Right.
And then there's I'm going to get my guy down in the paint. I'm going to plant myself there. I'm going to spread my legs out wide to really establish my positioning. And then I'm going to stick my arm out and demand the ball. That's what Joel was doing last night. And the shots weren't falling, but he was getting to the rim a lot more. And that's why he got up to 28 points on the night. But I also, I don't know how much of it has been actions in the offense to help him sort of just get open looks and get going. Like last year they had that delay action where it was just basically Joel initiates at the top of the key and then they go ISO middle of the floor so we can see everything. Now, to be fair to everybody, everyone knows how good Joel is and how bad the Sixers are outside of Joel.
Right.
So it holds that he's probably never going to see a single coverage this season for more than a possession or two. So his shots are all going to be harder to come by. And as much as if people clown Ben Simmons, he got him easy looks because he was he had a good over the top threat. It was a good pick and pop partnership. And they had the snug pick and roll that worked pretty well. So all factors that would have made Joel's life easier with Ben present. Ultimately, I think he's too good of a player for this to persist and to hold him back all season. I just think he needs to get some rhythm, get his legs under him, and sort of figure out how we can get, how the Sixers as a team can find ulterior or other entrances to the basket.
Right.
Now, it sounds like your team outlook is pretty low.
Yeah, until they resolve the Ben situation, I just don't know how you can look at them as like a surefire top 6 seed. Maybe, assuming health moving forward, and some team will probably get upended by an injury at some point, or as we see with Charlotte, like they're probably going to lose the next couple games because half of their rotation is now in health and safety protocols. And, given the state of the world as of late, it seems like that's going to become a more common occurrence. I think COVID is going to just be more of a factor than any of us would have anticipated coming into this year.
Yeah.
So, maybe the Sixers keep getting lucky and like the basketball gods pay us back for what we had to go through early in the season, and we just keep catching teams as they get their COVID outbreaks. But, fully healthy, let's say everyone in the East is fully healthy. Like I can't put them in the Milwaukee, Brooklyn tier. Mm-hmm. Miami's interesting now with Bam out for at least a month, if not 2. I think fully healthy, they would have been a comfortable top 6 seed. I don't think you can put them there. Chicago, I don't think is a fluke. Washington, I don't think is a fluke. Chicago, I think is pretty safely a top 6 seed. Washington, I think has a chance, but I'm not like guaranteed they're 100% going to finish in there. So, like, I think you could put the Sixers in a tier with a bunch of teams like the Washington, Boston, Atlanta, Miami now, Charlotte. I'm sure there's 1 or 2 other ones I'm forgetting, but like, I just think the East is so Cleveland is the one. The East is just good and deep now. So there aren't really many gimme games. And even the ones we thought like Orlando was supposed to be a gimme game, and that came down to the, last couple possessions. So, where the last like 10 years or so, there were always at least a couple of East teams that were just roadkill. Like you saw them as just a schedule win. That really isn't the case anymore. And you look at the Sixers schedule from now through the end of December, it's brutal. I think it was like 13 of their 15 opponents had a winning record on December 1st. So, if the Ben situation lingers as there has not been an update recently that makes me think a trade is coming at any point soon. So with that schedule coming up, I think they'd be pretty lucky to be 500 come January 1st. And at that point, you'll maybe be in play-in territory, but like you're not going to be in the top 6 in the East.
Yeah, I almost feel like if they get to the play-in and they're at that level, it's probably just better to just lose there and be done.
Yeah. For our own sanity.
I gotta tell you, I think for whatever reason, I remember that 6-game winning streak a lot better than this current skid. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably a better indicator of what the team is. I don't know why I think that, but I just think that there was like an element to Embiid's game where even if he was struggling to score the ball, his playmaking was much improved. He was making good reads. Teams were, I think, virtually at full health, and they were winning those games. And I mean, they took 2 from Chicago, and Chicago is legit. And then I think Miami falls back down to earth a little bit with Bam out. They might just end up being the 1 seed again.
Yeah, right. Right. Who knows?
That would be the funniest thing ever. If it just comes back to that. Do you think that the city of Philadelphia should just send Ben a collective like tray of chocolate candy saying like, forgive me?
I was gonna say some like nice soothing bath bombs.
Yes, exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah. A collective, like a massive boombox outside his apartment, right. Asking him to come back.
Yes, I don't think it's gonna work, but at this point, it seems like Daryl is, we'll see what happens December 15th. I think that we're starting to get into the time where conversations will actually start picking up. And that isn't to say that, there weren't a ton of guys who signed this summer that I think are like the holdup in a Ben trade, but between that, the ability to trade guys who signed this summer, and that includes guys on the Sixers too. Like, Korkmaz has been struggling a lot this year. Like, if they're willing to include him, if it's a bigger deal and they need more salary in particular, like, you can include him or you can include Danny. So that at least gives them more options as well in terms of building a Ben trade package. But also, we're now seeing teams like Portland just fired Neil Olshey yesterday. Indiana has not gotten off to the start that they would have expected, and losing to the Heat last night without Jimmy and without Bam, it seems like Pacers Twitter had a pretty good meltdown.
I saw your tweet from my other account because my current account has been hacked. Thank you to the Twitter bots for getting me hacked. So that was great. But yeah, no, I think Indiana is definitely. I mean, they can't trade Oladipo, or they can't trade Brogdon because of the extension. But like SGA didn't he signed? He's eligible, I think, for an extension or to be traded on December 15th, right?
So he's an interesting one because he signed the extension. It's a max deal, which usually, like with a rookie scale guy, his outgoing salary will be his current salary, and then the team taking him, it's the average of his new deal plus his current salary. So it'd be he's going to count for basically $30 million for any team that acquires him, but OKC he'd only count for $5 million. So it's like almost impossible to trade those guys on those poison pill deals. But OKC is almost $25 million under the cap. So they're like the one exception to this rule where I don't know if the salaries would exactly line up. I think OKC would probably need to send a little bit more back or to a third team, but it's at least possible. And mentally, I had like discounted it as soon as SGA signed that extension. But then this week, our friend Dave Early mentioned that the Sixers have at least internally discussed him. I was like, wait a second, they actually could potentially get him, couldn't they?
Do you think like Woj and Shams and whomever else have like their Twitter drafts just stocked, and then as soon as the hits midnight, they're just like, oh my god, I gotta unload all of these. Just like what happened, like Daryl Morey trades. He's just like, been in the works since like November.
Just how many different drafts they have of Ben Simmons has been traded for Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum. Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah, and like we're all staring here watching this, like, wait, so who's on the roster at the end of the night? Like, is Joel still here? Is Doc still here? Has he been traded too?
That's all that matters. If Joel's here, that's fine.
I know it really is the case. Last time you were on my pod, you had a take about a player who was going to get a max deal, who you said you would not give a max deal to. It was John Collins. Okay. I think your take has aged pretty well for the most part. I'm curious if you have a new target for whom might get a max deal, but you would not give him a max deal. And you cannot say John Wall is not an option. I don't think he'd be in line for that anyway, but he's an upcoming free agent. He is not an option. Who is a guy who you're just like looking at and you're like, I would not give him max money?
The really spicy take would be James Harden.
I agree. In fact, I've heard that there's been some like they're not 100% sold that they're going to do that, Brooklyn.
Interesting. I mean, I would give him a shorter term max deal, like a 2-year max deal. Fine. 5 years is where I get nervous if it's fully guaranteed.
Yeah. I think the Sixers, if they don't make a trade for like they don't do this impending SGA trade or or anything else, I think Daryl has Harden circled. I think that's something that he's going to push for pretty hard in the offseason.
That wouldn't surprise me. And you could, especially if Kyrie does come back or whatever happens there, you could make a case for it. Like it would make sense for the Nets to do it. I guess even without Kyrie, like KD and Simmons could work well together. the other guy who I think Ayton gets a max or close to it. I feel pretty good about it. Miles Bridges is having a hell of a season.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And I'm worried for Charlotte that he's going to get. I don't think he gets a max either. But if they feel pressure to give him one because of the season that he's having, that's going to age like a Tobias contract.
Wow. Do you think when he gets the league out pass and he's alone and he just goes up for like one of those spiraling dunks that he just sees dollar signs?
I hope so. I mean, honestly, he's just anytime he sees LaMelo walking into the building, he's like, here's $15. Like, you have just made me so much money in the last year.
This is an escrow account. I'm gonna deposit money in here.
Yeah.
Anytime you pass to me.
I honestly, LaMelo probably deserves 20% of Miles Bridges' next deal at least.
That's right. All right, Bryan. Well, enjoy the rest of your Saturday night. Thanks for hopping on. Where can can everybody find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at btoporek, BTOPOREK. I write about the Sixers and some salary cap stuff for Forbes, so I'm sure I'll have plenty more on the Ben Simmons stuff, especially as we get to December 15th. And I am the co-host of the NBA podcast. You can find that wherever podcasts are found.
I do like the name of your podcast because it's like, this is the official NBA podcast.
It's the only one. It's weird. For such a big sport, it's crazy that there's only one NBA podcast.
I love it though. It's just like this is the NBA podcast. This is all it is.
I know. We're going for SEO. Let's hope it pays off at some point.
That's right. All right, Bryan. You take care. Have a good night.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, man. You too.
See ya.